blow them out.
And it's me.
Should we sing?
1, 2, 3. And over here. This will be more effective than the stopwatch in the House of Representatives.
This is not the first time that Kevin has lent his support to one of our often overlooked conditions, that is Parkinson's. Kevin.
Thank you very much, both to Ray and to Jill and to Anne for your kind remarks here this morning. I'm here for a single purpose, and that is to honour those of you who are suffering from Parkinson's, who are carers and supporters, and those in the medical profession who are still trying to beat down the doors as to what causes this continuing affliction of our time. I'm also here because my good friend and colleague Anthony Byrne, Federal Member for Holt, who has been a pal of mine for a decade or more, said he had this group here. They were doing good things for Parkinson's, and would I come down? And so you might ask, well, where's he? Well, let me give you the answer to that. We both sit on the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence, which is meeting in Sydney today. I'm playing hooky. And I'm here purely for this event, before I go back to Bris Vegas this afternoon. And I acknowledge also our representatives from local government whose names were recorded before, and the support that they provide to community organisations such as this, who do an extraordinary job for the community. And from Parkinsons Victoria, its state counterpart organisations, Parkinsons Queensland, which I'm familiar with, and the work of Peter Silburn, I acknowledge all of your contributions and thank you for your presence here today. I think I was taken particularly by what Jill had to say before. What Jill said was, it affects your pride. My mum had Parkinson's, and it affects mum's pride. Mum was what I describe as a Queensland Catholic matriarch from Central Casting. And I don't know if that creates a visual picture for you, but it certainly does in my part of the world. Very self-reliant with myself, and my father grew up on a farm. She was the anchor of our lives, particularly after my father died. She then returned to the workforce as a nurse, having been on the farm for 25 years. That was a challenge for women back in the early 70s, and she did that. And then she worked through until the age of 65, and then she retired. And then once she hit the age of 70, she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. And this was a struggle for Mum, a real struggle. As a clinical nurse, she understood the symptoms as they emerged all too plainly and all too clearly. And I had many conversations with my mum over that period of time about how it affected her life. As someone who was active in the community, was involved in more community organisations that you could poke a stick at, was a pillar of the local church, and all those things. And suddenly she had this challenge. And like each and every one of you who I've seen here so far this morning, Mum was absolutely determined not to let it get her down. And it didn't. In the end, she didn't die of Parkinson's. She died, in fact, of lung cancer as a non-smoker. And that is a separate story unto itself. But throughout her later years, Parkinson's was her challenge. I've been through all the discussions that she had with the family about the intensity of her levodopa and how often to take it and when to take it and how she could sleep best at night. But Mum's simple recipe was never, ever let it get you down. Get out there, remain active. Mum would have loved to have known there was a group called Painting with Parkinsons. Mum always saw herself as a frustrated poet, writer, artist, designer, all of the above. And I'm sure she would have taken to groups like yours and those like it around Australia in a flash had they been active 10, 15 years ago. The mark of any civilised society is how we care for one another when life deals you an unfair hand. It's the mark of any civilised society, because this can happen to any of us. There are so many neurological afflictions and so many other medical conditions out there. And this one is, in terms of its prevalence, has the second largest prevalence after dementia of any other neurological condition in Australia. There are some 75 to 80,000 Australians who suffer from Parkinson's. That's a lot of our fellow Australians, our brothers and sisters, members of the Australian family. There are some 30 new diagnoses of Parkinson's every day. There are some 25,000 plus sufferers from Parkinson's here in the great state of Victoria. And so this is not just a small and trifling matter, it's actually a large matter. And for those of you living with this condition, it's a very large matter. I know, I do understand. And so when you said before, Jill, it affects your pride, there were so many echoes of my mum in what you said. And my mum, like you, punched her way through. And she never let the thing get her down. She died at the age of 83, a long time after she was first diagnosed, as I said, of a different condition altogether. So the question is, what do we do about this thing? You can have people who are your representatives in the Parliament stand up and talk about it, but what are we doing as a nation and as a community? And that's the key challenge. In terms of Parkinson's research, the investment through the National Health and Medical Research Council in 2001-2012, some $60 or $70 million to fund 362 grants for research into Parkinson's, including annual funding of over $7 million a year for each of the past 5 years. Also in 2011-12, $51 million was spent on medications used in the treatment of Parkinson's disease through the PBS. In terms of community organisations, under the Community Investment Program, as I understand it, some $20,000 have been allocated to painting with Parkinsons, and I hope that's been of some assistance in the work that you do here. But my overall message is that none of this would be in any way useful unless you had local community organisations making things happen for each individual who has to deal with this challenging disease. So enter Painting with Parkinsons, and enter, of course, the work which has been done by Sister Mary Anne over here of the Sacred Order of Painting with Parkinsons. Because basically this is just a human challenge. It's getting out there and being with people, one-on-one, and based on the best neurological advice about the creative part of our brain and how that needs to be activated by continued creative engagement, encouraging people, even those who have been suffering from this disease for quite some time, to pick up a paintbrush and to create. It is therapeutic, it is effective. Anne was describing to me herself the impact on her own mobility over the last 4 to 5 years. And so this is great grassroots community work led by community activists who, in the best traditions of Australia, care. Not just care, but then elect to do something about it. So for the work which you good folk are doing in terms of painting with Parkinson's, I salute you. When you look around the world, this is no small challenge either. If I look at the following names, what do they all have in common? John Paul II, Muhammad Ali, Michael J. Fox, Salvador Dali, and Margaret Rudd. That's my mum. Well, I don't think if you have John Paul II and Muhammad Ali up there, you could say they're all Roman Catholics. They're all Parkinson sufferers, or have been. And this is a condition which is indiscriminate in terms of who it strikes, and for reasons we still know not the cause. So across the world there is a huge effort by the research community and by community groups such as yourselves to wrestle this thing to the ground, to discover its causes, to discover the best therapeutic applications, to ease its impact on human lives and their ability to sleep and have mobility, as well as how to unleash people's creativity and self-worth during the period in which people have to live with this particular condition. So I acknowledge you as being an important part of a global and national effort to deal with this insidious disease. Finally, for the future, I would simply say to each and every one of you, if you need a helping hand or a useful voice, occasionally useful voice, I will be around to help provide voice for you in the national space. That, I think, is the least I owe to the effort that my mother put into mothering me, bringing me up, and enduring, and in fact punching through with this disease while she had it. Others will be your national advocates as well, and it is important that they continue to be so. But as a voice who will always seek to ask for more in terms of the research effort, a voice which will always seek to push the TGA to make sure that there is an appropriate allocation through the PBS of what is needed as far as Parkinson drug treatments is concerned, and also in terms of community level support for organisations such as this. Regard me, to the extent that it's useful for you, as your continued friend in court. I thank you.